Let's take a look at part of the packet that you received today. The packet that has Latin 2 grammar notes is the one that I want us to take a look at first. What I want you to do is look through your packet, see if you can find this, and let's take a look at it together. As you skim through, remember you can pause anytime you need to throughout this thing. You can see on the first page that we have a review section. At the bottom of your toolkit, for the grammar, there should be an R with a number beside of it. That means review and then whatever page number that would be. After the review section, everything is listed by stages. Stage is the same thing as chapter if you're new to the online Latin course. We'll pick up with stage 16 after we finish the review of Latin 1, and then we're going to go all the way down to end the course with stage 28. Okay, let's take a look at the review information. Okay, we're going to start off first with a review of grammar terms that you might see in a dictionary. And I went ahead and wrote down a definition for you so that there's nothing that you need to write unless you want to add in things as we go along. Feel free to highlight things that you feel are more important than others, or maybe things that are new or foreign to your understanding of Latin so far. If you did not take Latin with me last semester or for Latin 1, you might not be familiar with some of the memory tools that I've given the kids in the past. So those are things like SID space that might be confusing to you if you haven't seen them before. Okay, let's take a look at a few of these. So the ablative, you know, is a noun used with certain prepositions, and SID space is a way of remembering those. I'm going to let you just kind of skim through what you have here. And if you were to go all the way down to SID space, I have SID space listed as a separate thing here underneath the dictionary. It is a memory tool to remember the most common preps that take the ablative. SID space is made up of sub, in, de, that's the SID, sine, pro, a or ab, cum, e, or ex. That gives you the space part. So if you can remember SID space and what SID space stands for, then you will remember which prepositions take the ablative. That will not change in Latin 2. It will be the exact same prepositions that will take the ablative. If there are any other prepositions, they will not take the ablative, but the accusative instead. So I'm going to let you go through and skim the rest of the words here. Part 2 deals with the verbs. I started off with principal parts because principal parts are crucial for the understanding of Latin. You've already answered some questions about principal parts on one of the exercises that you did probably on the very first day of class. Remember that in a dictionary, there are 4 different spellings, or there could be 4 different spellings of a verb. The first spelling is called the 1pp. The second spelling is the 2pp. The third spelling is the 3pp. And the fourth spelling is the 4pp. Each of these actually have different names. I'm calling them principal parts for short. This one is the first person singular, present active indicative. We're just going to call it 1pp. The 2pp is the same thing as the infinitive, the present active infinitive. The 3pp has a name too, first person singular, perfect active indicative. We're just going to simply use 3pp. And the 4pp is called the perfect passive participle in some books. And if it has a um on the end of it, some books are referring to that form as the supine. They're the same thing, they're used slightly differently, and that's why there are different names for the 4pp. We're going to be using 4pp as, in Latin 2, as the perfect passive participle. Okay, let's move on. There are 4 different families of verbs, or the conjugations, and you can identify them by looking at the infinitive. The infinitive are the 2pp of the verb. The common ones are are, you have ere, one with a long mark, one without a long mark, and then ire. As you see, first, second, and fourth conjugation verbs have long marks on the vowel in front of the R. Third conjugation doesn't. Third conjugation is just going to be that short ere. Okay, they're in alphabetical order. It should be easy to remember them. You have your A's, then your E's, and the I's. No O or no U. If you have other things, like ESSE or VELLE, then you know that you're dealing with an irregular verb. Right, how to read a verb chart. I think I wrote in some information on the chart that you received under number 3. The first person singular, you know, means I. Second singular is you, third singular is he. First plural we, second plural you all, and third plural is they. I also wrote down the endings that you would expect to see in these. They're also the same endings as you would see down here in number 4. The endings for most, must, isn't is the way I told the kids in Latin 1 to remember this. You have the M-O-S-T on the singular side. M-U-S-T-I-S and N-T gives you the must and isn't for the plural side. These endings are used most often in Latin. They're used for the present tense, the imperfect tense, and there's one more tense that you're going to learn in Latin too, and it uses these same endings. The second set of endings that you're going to encounter in Latin are the perfect endings. They're only used to make the perfect tense. And the endings are not most, must, isn't, but some of them look similar to most, must, isn't. Here you have I, isti, it, emus, istis, and errant. They're going to fit in the chart. You should already know how to do that. Okay, part 5, subjects and verbs need to agree. If the subject is singular, the verb has to be singular. If the subject is plural, then the verb has to be plural. 2 singular subjects would make a plural verb. And so you can kind of take a look at those. Okay, part 6, how to make the 3 different tenses in Latin. Of course, this is dependent upon what conjugation the verb belongs to. And again, I've kind of spelled out your first, second, third. There's another kind of a third called third I stem. It's sort of a hybrid, a split between third and fourth. And then you have the fourth conjugation verbs. The 3 tenses that you learned in Latin 1 were the present, the imperfect, and the perfect. I have the translations underneath the tenses to help jog your memory on that. Remember on the test, when you're doing this, it's going to be formation and recognition. You're not going to do a whole lot of major chart forming for this. Okay, let's take a look at how these things look. 1 pp means first principal part. You know, that's the first dictionary spelling. Normally it ends in an O. It could end in an M. And then the second part of the rule is 2 pp minus re. This goes everywhere else in the verb chart. So your first person singular, the I form, uses the 1 pp. And then all the other forms in the present tense are 2 pp minus re with both of these kinds of verbs. If you look over at third conjugation does something different. Remember that this was a short E. Short E doesn't like to stay. This short E turns into other vowels. This is the O for I's U. You had an earlier screencast on how to conjugate the verbs, and if you need further assistance on that, let me know and I'll do another cast for you. Okay, then the last 2 categories of verbs are the third I stem and the fourth. Third I stem is recognized because it has an ERE for the 2 pp, but that's what makes it third, but it has an IO in the 1 pp. That IO means that it is I stem. Look at fourth conjugation. See how it has an I in front of the O? All fourth conjugation verbs are going to be IO, IRE verbs. So these third conjugation verbs want to be fourth, but technically they're not because they have ERE in the 2 pp spot. So they're going to kind of tweak the rules as we go with those. To make the present tense, you're going to have 2 pp minus the last 3 letters. The last 3 letters are either going to be ERE or they're going to be IRE. And then you're going to use IO, 4 I's, IU with the verb endings. Okay, the imperfect tense is not as painful as the present. You only have 2 rules as opposed to 3. You're going to go to the 2 pp for every form on the chart, minus the RE, add BA. Remember that BA means was, were, used to, kept. And then you're going to add the endings to identify the subject. Okay, then for the last 2 conjugations, the third I stem and fourth, you're going to take off either the ERE or the IRE. And since you took the vowels off, you're going to have to add some vowels in. These vowels are going to be I and E. So instead of ba, for these 2 sets of verbs, you're going to have EA ba with your endings. And then the easiest tense of all to form is going to be the perfect tense. The perfect tense is going to have 2 changes. One change is a different root word. You're not going to use the 2 pp to make the perfect tense. And the other thing that you're going to have to recognize will be a new set of endings. The present and imperfect use most, must, isn't. The perfect tense is going to use the I, isti, it. Okay, number 7 is talking about verbs taking direct objects. Remember, those are the accusatives. But there are 4 verbs that you met in Latin 1 that don't take the accusative, but take the dative. Just because. That's the way that those verbs work. I suppose in your English class you might refer to these verbs as being intransitive. Don't worry about that for right now if you're not familiar with intransitive verbs. Any form of credo, respondio, filio, or placeo, plaquet, they can change spellings, will be followed with a dative. So the noun endings will have to be in the dative case to go with this. Okay, the next thing for number 8, irregular verbs. Irregular verbs do not follow the rule. You had quite a few of them last year. You have sum, meaning am, ad sum, am here, ob sum, am away, fero, meaning carry or bring, eo, meaning go. You saw it spelled as it in Latin 1. Exeo, you saw it spelled as ex-it. It means to go out. So eo is go. Eo with x is to go out. You also had redeo. Ao means go. The red part means back. Sum means am. The POS in front of this word means able. And then you have volo, meaning to wish or to want, and nolo, to not want or to not wish. Sometimes you could even use refuse for the word nolo. Okay, so those are the examples of irregular verbs from Latin 1. Beneath this, I have 4 of them conjugated for you in the 3 tenses. These will be the ones that you're going to need to know most for our stories. So you notice how sum est, sum est sunt is going to change the root word. Sometimes it's su, sometimes it's e, sometimes it's es. Possum does the same thing. The su, the e, the es in the middle of the word changes just like it did with sum. This is a compound of sum. The pos and the pot in front are prefixes that mean able. So here you have the words that mean am, and here are the words that mean am able. It's the same thing as can. When you reach the imperfect tense, you don't use ba with these sum words. Instead, you use the word eram. Eram means was, and since it means was, it's the imperfect tense. And then poteram will be was able. I was able. When you reach the perfect tense, all verbs, no matter what, are going to follow the rule. Remember, the rule has 2 parts to it. 3PP, and then your perfect endings, the ISD it. So this foo came from the 3PP up here of sum. The potui came from the 3PP of possum. Here's the third one. Wolui came from the 3PP of wolo, and noloui came from the 3PP up here of nolo. Nolo means to want, wolo means to want, nolo means to not want. Sometimes in Latin, you would see the negative written as 1 word. Sometimes you see it as 2 words. So wolo is I want, nolo I don't want. Vis, you want, non vis, you don't want. In the imperfect tense, it looks a whole lot like what we did with the normal verbs up above, where you have the BA with the endings. But you cannot go to the 2PP and take off RE. Look at the 2PP of these verbs. You have VELLE. There's no RE to remove. And for nole, you don't have an RE to remove. But yet these 2 will be easy to recognize with the ba. Okay, let's take a look at number 10. Number 10 down here is talking about the infinitive. The infinitive is simply the 2PP of the verb. Almost always it will end in an RE. And we use this RE to, as a verb, it is a verb used as a noun. And this noun form is going to be translated with the 2 in front of it. This is also the form that identifies conjugation. You saw that earlier. In Latin, there are several verbs that like to take the infinitive. So you have possum, wolo, nolo, and debeo. And then you have some examples. You can read over this without me having to read it to you. Also, here, number 12, you can see common impersonal verbs that like to take the infinitive too. You might want to write down the meanings. I don't know if I have all these defined down at the bottom or not. For these impersonal constructions, you have to remember that impersonal means not a person. If it's not a person, that means you start with the word it. So you could say it is or it was, depending on what your verb is, and then you will have the adjective coming next. So melius est would be it is better. If you had commodum est, it is convenient. Decorum est, it is proper. Difficile est, it is difficult. Facile est, it is easy. Necesse est, it is necessary. If you change est to erat, then you have it was. Melius erat, it was easy. Okay, not easy, but better. I'm going to stick on the facile one down here. And then usually you will have a dative that will indicate who it is that you're referring to. And then you need an infinitive for what it was, better, convenient, proper, difficult, easy, or necessary. Okay, so melius est tibi laborare, it is better, is the first two words. For you, that's tibi, and then to work is laborare because of the re. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Here we're at part 3. These are the adjective notes. You know that an adjective normally shows up after the noun in Latin. So we have the book hour is heavy, and in English that is not the way we do it. We have to flip these two words around. Our book is heavy. Ego gladiatores fortes vidi. Fortes means brave or strong, and it comes after the word gladiator. So it looks like this sentence is saying, I saw the gladiators brave, but we would want to turn that around in English for I saw the brave gladiators. Notice that liber noster are both nominative and singular, and notice that fortes and gladiatores are both accusative plural. Each of these examples happen to have a noun and adjective pair that are in the exact same declension. That's why the endings are the same. Okay, for number 2, sometimes an adjective shows up in front of the noun like we do in English. You'll typically see that when you have adjectives indicating size, like big, huge, or small, they will come in front of the adjective, like in English, or quantity words like many, few, and if you have numbers, like two slave girls, they typically come in front of the noun that they're describing. And the demonstrative pronouns that are used as adjectives sometimes, he can ille, meaning this, these, or that, those, typically come in front. Okay, so you have some examples that you can read. 3 ways that nouns and adjectives agree are in case, number, and gender. So you have frater calidus, magnis, imperiis, and I think that you can look through those. Part 4, the 3 different degrees of adjectives. This is like good, better, best. Bad, worse, worst. Long, longer, longest. The positive degree is just a simple word in English and in Latin. And then I have some examples here for you and some exceptions at the bottom. The next step up is called the comparative. This is when you have 2 different items that you are trying to distinguish. One of them could be, clearer, more clear, too clear, rather clear, and in Latin you're going to have eor. Sometimes eor will be by itself, sometimes eor will have an ending after it. It depends on what case the adjective is in. And you have some examples down here. I didn't give you any with the endings after it, but iratior, if you added an em to the end of it, it would make angrier be in the accusative singular. The third step up is the superlative. This is when you're comparing 3 or more items. So it could be the fastest, it could be very fast, or the most fast. And things that you look for are going to be issim, like issimus. This is what's going to be used with most of the adjectives. If you have an er adjective like sacer or pulcher, instead of using issimus, you're going to double the r and add emus. And then there are 6 different lis adjectives. Not every lis adjective, only 6 of them, are going to double the l and add im. So difficilemus, facilemus would be another example. Okay, the exceptions at the bottom, good, better, best is an irregular adjective, in English and in Latin, and magnus, major, maximus in Latin is irregular, but in English it's not, because we would say great, greater, greatest, or great, greater, very great. But in Latin you'll change the word a bit. Okay, this brings us down to the noun notes, identifying the declension of a noun. Just like you have conjugations for verbs. Those are the verb families. You have noun families. There are 3 noun families that we looked at in Latin 1. First declension, remember, were the words that ended in an A. I have this marked as new for Latin 2 because you did not learn a thing called the genitive case. And these forms here are the genitive forms. You'll see those on the dictionary list. I'll show those to you when we get to the vocab. But AE words are going to make up the first declension. Words that end in an I in the genitive make up the second declension, and IS words are going to make up the third declension. Okay, let me tie it in with what you saw in Latin 1. In Latin 1, first declension were the A words. Second declension were the US words and a couple of ER words, and everything else made up third declension. Okay, number 2. There are 5, really 6 common noun cases: the nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. And you met the nominative, the dative, accusative, and ablative in Latin 1. Remember, the nominative was the subject, and usually it comes first in a sentence. It doesn't have to, but normally it does. The dative normally comes next in a Latin sentence, and this is the indirect object that's used with certain verbs like credo, filio, placio, and respondeo, and sometimes it's used in impersonal constructions. The accusative typically comes next in a Latin sentence. This is the direct object, although sometimes it is used as the object of prepositions. And then the ablative can also be used as the object of prepositions if it is a sid-space preposition. And then at the end of a Latin sentence, if you're thinking about word order, you would have a verb. Genitive can go normally right after the noun that it's describing or showing possession of. You don't know that, so don't worry about that. Your prepositions in the ablative can show up wherever in the sentence also. Okay, the next thing for number 3 is speedo. You saw that in part 1 where it had the definitions. Actually, that was sid-space that you saw. I believe that speedo is there too. Speedo is a way that you can remember the uses of the cases that are listed up here in part 2 in order. So the S in speedo is for subject, P is for possession, the I is for indirect object, the D is for direct object, and O is for object of prep. So this kind of gets you through the basic uses of the 5 cases. The 6th case you'll be getting in Latin 2 that's called the vocative. Okay, on here it says complete the chart of noun cases and uses, and you have the translations here, and you have the uses listed. Here's your speedo again, and then over on the side I went ahead and wrote in the endings for the first, second, and third declensions. The endings for each of these forms are divided with a slash. If it's on the left of the slash, it is singular. On the right of the slash, it's a plural. Let me know if you have difficulty reading that, and I will type it up separately so that you can read it. Sometimes my writing is sloppy. All right, number 5. You have already seen this before, but since it relates to nouns, I'm going to show it again here with nouns. There are certain verbs that require the dative, and you can see those here. Number 6, we have sentence patterns. The Romans were not as strict with word order as we are in English. They can tell by the endings on a word how that word is being used. In English, we really rely on the order of words as they're being spoken to figure out what is going on. But the tendency is, if you have a 3-word sentence, that you will have a nominative accusative verb will be the order of it. So when you translate, you start with the first word, you bounce to the last word, and then you go back and pick up the middle. If you have a longer sentence, you might have a nominative, dative, accusative with the verb. And so you're going to start with the nominative. You need the subject first, bounce to the verb, and then after you reach the verb, you want to figure out what the verb acted upon. So you need an accusative, and then to whom or for whom the verb did that action. So you'll pick up the dative case. Now those 4 verbs up here in number 5, credo, filio, respondeo, and placio, don't take the accusative. And so you'll have a 3-word sentence with your subject first, bounce to your verb, and then go back and pick up the dative, which is going to seem somewhat like a direct object, even though it's in the dative. Right, number 7, here's the sid space that I showed you back up in part 1. Sid space is a way to remember the prepositions that take the ablative. If it's not SID space, that means the preposition takes the accusative. Pronouns. Lots of different kinds of pronouns. Cambridge did not make a big deal out of these pronouns in Latin 1, but they did introduce them. So personal pronouns, you have I, you, we, and you all. The demonstratives show where something is. It demonstrates location. This means it's close to the person who's speaking. That means it is far from the speaker. I didn't realize I had done it this way. Where I have the this word, this is for hic, and ile means that. I should have put the word that here. That means away from the speaker. Interrogatives are going to ask questions like quis and quid. There are a lot more, but I think these are the only two you've had so far. And then relative clauses were the very last thing in stage 15 that we took a look at. These are the qui, qua, quad words, and you have seen qui, quam, quae, that look like interrogatives, but there is no question mark. I probably have some examples of these later on, so hold on. Okay, the personal pronouns in all of their different forms. The genitive is missing since you have not seen that yet. Here are the relative clause. I thought I had that in here. So for number 3, you should be able to recognize a relative clause, and you're supposed to underline it. I've underlined them here in the 3 examples. Put a parenthesis around the pronoun, so you have your who. Quae will be the Latin word for who. Quas is the Latin word for who or whom. And then it says to draw an arrow from the relative pronoun to the word that it describes. I can't draw arrows with the laptop. If you know how, let me know, because I don't know how to do that yet. But the whom is talking about the Olympian. Quae is talking about Juno. Quas is talking about Urbase. So Olympian, Juno, and Urbase are all called antecedents. Okay, so you can kind of read over more of the information about that too. Part 6, we have question words. You could change the tone of your voice to indicate that you're asking a question. You could start with a question word, and you can kind of read over those. There are 3 different words that indicate a yes-no type question, and they differ in how they're used. If the first word in the sentence ends in an NE, it indicates that it is a question, and you're just asking a yes-no thing. Do you like ice cream? If you start the sentence with none, then you think the person is going to say yes. You like ice cream, don't you? And then if you start the question with the word num, you think the person is going to say no. You don't like oyster coconut ice cream, do you? Probably not. Okay, and so down here you have some examples using pizza. Pizza is not a Latin word. I'm using it as if it were. Part 7, there are 2 different ways to say and so far. You have et that shows between words being joined, like pater et mater. And you also have que that is added to the end of the second word being joined, pater mater que, for dad and mom. That looks like all I have for the Latin 2 grammar. Hold on a second and we'll take a look at the vocab real quick. Let me put this in a separate recording.